are wondering ahead of the French president's New Year press conference, the first since allegations of an affair. As you can see, it should be starting shortly. Tight security as Egyptians vote in a referendum on a new constitution. It's widely seen as a verdict on the removal of Islamist leader Mohamed Morsi. And a low-key ceremony in Tunisia to mark 3 years since mass protests forced the president to stand down. It's been a violent path to democracy, with the key constitution deadline missed. Welcome back to the newsroom. I'm Claire Pride. We start with Egyptians voting on a proposed constitution in a 2-day referendum. There's been a massive rollout of security forces, some clashing with supporters of the Muslim Brotherhood in several areas. According to security officials, at least 3 people have been killed. No casualties, though, in an explosion before voting began near a courthouse in a suburb of the capital. Now designated a terrorist group, the Muslim Brotherhood, to which Mohamed Morsi belongs, is boycotting the vote. It's the first electoral test for the military-backed government that took over after Morsi was ousted in July. Jonathan Crane has more.
For the third time in as many years, Egyptians wait in line to vote on a new constitution, one that reverses many of the reforms put in place by ousted Muslim Brotherhood leader Mohamed Morsi. It's the first ballot since he was toppled by the military last July.
The new constitution is very good. It's beneficial to women, children and people who have been marginalized.
I've come specifically to support the law in Egypt, and because of that traitorous group, the Muslim Brotherhood, so that we can end their influence.
With the constitution almost certain to pass, the referendum is being seen more as a popularity test for military leader Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. The general is looking to shore up support ahead of a likely run on the presidency later this year.
The current government sees people turning out to vote as proof they accept it. The lower the turnout, the weaker the position of the government.
While many view Sisi as the man to move Egypt forward, others are wary of the continuing political strife that's plaguing the country. Since Morsi's removal, more than 1,000 people, many of them Islamists, have been killed in brutal crackdowns by security forces on dissenting voices. A low turnout would likely embolden supporters of the banned Muslim Brotherhood, who are boycotting the ballot along with other opposition groups.
We can never give legitimacy to a regime which fools the people and acts like it's a civil democratic regime, when it's neither civil nor democratic.
The referendum's taking place amid tight security, with 360,000 police officers and soldiers deployed to keep order, while snipers have been stationed on roofs near polling stations.
Now, Tunisia's leaders hoped that its new constitution would be adopted by today, but the National Assembly missed the deadline. Why by today? Well, this Tuesday is the 3rd anniversary of President Ben Ali's ouster, inspiring other Arab Spring uprisings. For the occasion, thousands of people gathered in Tunis, but as our correspondent there explains, there were 2 camps, this a few days after the Islamist Prime Minister Ali Larayed resigned.
Thousands of people turned out to celebrate the 3rd anniversary of the revolution in Avenue Habib Bourguiba, the main thoroughfare in downtown Tunis today. It was a festival atmosphere and mostly support for the transition and the progress that's been made. But the people were quite visibly not celebrating as one. There was a police cordon running roughly down the middle of the street and separating the celebrators between those supporting Ennahda and those supporting the opposition. The groups called out competing slogans across police barriers at several points of the day. And really not all was celebration. There was many messages of criticism, even criticism from some Ennahda supporters. The so-called Leagues for the Protection of the Revolution were there, and they held sign calling the current government government of submissives and saying that they had given up too much in compromising with the opposition. So though, as you heard in the video report just there, that most Ennahda politicians say that they resigned out of the national interest, many of Ennahda's core supporters don't agree with that and felt they gave up and compromised too much by giving up power.
Now, the French president is due to give a press conference shortly. Officially, it's to outline new plans for the economy. But François Hollande will no doubt face questions about his private life a few days after a magazine published allegations of an affair with actress Julie Gaillet. That got everyone talking here in France, but also abroad, as Yves Irvine reports.
A love story that has been making front pages of newspapers across the world. France's First Lady is humiliated, this one reads, after the president is reported to be having an affair with an actress. For international journalists in Paris, it was more than his personal life that was in question.
We felt it was important to describe what had happened because it was in all of the French media and because of the heritage of the Clinton, or the legacy, I should say, of the Clinton affair, which ended up bringing down a president. And I think all of our political correspondents, our editors who dealt with that, are enormously aware of that.
It's not the first time the love life of a French president has met the papers. Hollande's predecessor, Nicolas Sarkozy, was often in the gossip columns, something Hollande, whose alleged romance took place just a few metres from the Élysée Palace, had strongly criticised. Now it's his affair that is gaining great attention.
I think that in France, I think it is a real issue because the question of leadership is a real problem for this president. And I think, as I said in the Daily Beast, this is a moment when France feels very much the need to have a leader, not a lover, as the head of state.
Not all foreign media, however, felt Hollande's mistress was worth mentioning. After years of Berlusconi's bunga-bunga parties, Italy's La Vallée des Templiers did as little as possible.
There are so many serious stories that are of interest that the story of Hollande on a scooter in the middle of the night in Paris has to be treated with a level of irony. In Italy, we have gotten an overdose in the last 20 years of gossip stories, and we wanted to turn the page and give our readers something else at the end of the day.
In a press survey on Sunday, 77% of the French public said they were in favour of respecting the president's privacy. 84% said the news didn't change their opinion of the head of state.
Ladies and gentlemen, ministers, ladies and gentlemen, members of the press, this is the third press conference since I assumed office. On the 31st of December, I expressed my New Year's wishes to the French people and set out a roadmap. It's straightforward. It's to get French society on the move, because I have one profound belief, which is that if France is to retain its influence in the world, if France wishes to have an impact on events in Europe, and if it wishes to stay in control of its destiny, it must at all costs regain economic strength. However, it has lost some of that strength over the past 10 years. There was, to begin with, a long, profound crisis that was no doubt underestimated, including by ourselves. And then there was a headlong flight for too long now, with deficits constantly increasing, public account deficits, our trade deficit deepened. A stop was put to these events, and that is thanks to the efforts of the Prime Minister for 18 months now, instrumental in this process. The first results are there. They are weak, too weak, of course. For 6 months now, youth unemployment is declining. Yes, there's been a leveling off in unemployment, and a trend is emerging, but we have not yet won the battle on the jobs front. So what needs to be done? And that's what I set out to the French people. We must begin a battle, open a new stage. It's not a matter of changing course, it's a matter of moving faster, further, accelerating and deepening. In 2014, the challenge is not just that France should find growth once again. That growth is emerging, but that growth needs to be as vigorous as possible. We'll only achieve that with the support and mobilization of all, including businesses, without which there cannot be lasting jobs created. That's why I proposed the Responsibility Pact. It is based on a straightforward principle, which is to lighten labor costs for businesses, to reduce the constraints that weigh on their business activities, and in exchange for that, to allow more hires and more social dialogue. Why this pact? Because the time has come to resolve the prime problem facing France. Its output. Yes, we need to produce more. We need to produce better. And it's therefore on the supply side that we must act, focusing on supply. It's not contradictory with demand. Supply even creates demand. Now, this pact covers 4 initiatives. The first is to continue bringing down labor costs. We set this in hand with the program that I presented last November, the Jobs and Competitiveness Tax Credit that applies this year in 2014, 4% reduction in payroll taxes, 6% next year. I am setting a new target, which is that by 2017, for companies and self-employed workers, it should be an end to family contributions, family allowances, and that represents a reduction of 30 billion. So the discussion will hinge on the future of the competitiveness and jobs tax credit, how it can form part of this process, and how to fund social welfare. It's the condition so that companies can find greater opportunities, not just to please them or to offer them a gift, but everyone knows here that the margin of businesses that funds both R&D is in 2012 at its lowest point in history. The second initiative is to give greater visibility to companies. There can't be investment if there isn't a clear framework set, if the rules change. So we will set a time horizon, 2017, with a pathway for labor costs for companies. I want to change the tax system for companies and to reduce the number of taxes which sometimes cost more to recover than what they can bring in, with 2 key requirements: investment and jobs. A first act will be included in the finance bill in 2015. The second initiative forming part of the Responsibility Pact is simplification. It's all about reducing the number of standards, promoting better regulation. To go even further, to reduce sometimes useless or costly procedures and to facilitate decision-making. This is a key requirement to promote confidence. I've entrusted the task to 2 people, an MP and a CEO, This alliance may surprise, but they need to implement this process to the full and to promote this simplification process. They will review the 10 key milestones in the setting up of the company, from its foundation to its disposal, through the opening up of plants, access to procurement, recruitment processes, tax and financial controls. Every aspect will be screened in detail, not to reduce protections, notably in terms of social welfare, health or environmental protection, but really to simplify and to facilitate this process. And this trend will continue until the end of my 5-year term. The fourth initiative are the measures in return. They must be defined at a national level and rolled out by industry sector. They will involve specific recruitment targets, bringing young people into the labour market, the work of seniors, the quality of work, training, opening negotiations on pay, and also the modernization of social dialogue. An observatory for these measures will be set up and Parliament will be involved in the process. This is what the Responsibility Pact is all about. It represents a major social compromise, probably the greatest that has ever been put forward and presented to our country for decades. It involves all stakeholders, the state, local government authorities, and of course the social partners. My method revolves around negotiation. This method has shown its worth since the contract on younger generations, and then on securing the labour contracts, the retirement, pensions reform, and vocational training. This is the right method. The Responsibility Pact represents an opportunity. Each of us must seize this opportunity, not just in their own interest, but for France. All trade associations, all political parties in some shape or form, all local authorities are concerned by this. The Responsibility Pact is a coming together for jobs, and here again I'm relying on each and every one of you to assume their responsibility. No time must be lost, and no election taking place in the meantime must prevent us from moving forward. France must now bounce back to get back on the right foot. This requires a very detailed and busy agenda on the 21st of January. Here I will address all the economic and jobs stakeholders to officially launch this pact and its initiatives. The social partners will be received in the following days by the Prime Minister and other ministers before the end of January. The meeting of business and corporation tax will be started by the Prime Minister, the High Council for Social Welfare Protection that must look at how best to secure financing will submit its first report at the end of February. Lastly, in April, the government will launch a second set of measures aimed at simplification. All these discussions will continue and will conclude at the major social conference to be held in the spring. A document will formalize the commitments of this pact and how the measures in return must be implemented. The government will assume its responsibility before Parliament on this text. Our bill for financial and social obligations for the period 2015-2017 will be voted in the autumn. It will be consistent with what will be decided as part of the Responsibility Pact, but also in the overhaul of the tax system, notably for households, set in hand by the Prime Minister, because all that is part of an overall package. On the 31st of December, during my New Year wishes, I also set out to the French people my determination, which is to bring down public spending. Why? Not because it is an end in itself. I'm attached more than any other to maintaining public service, to our social model. So why bring down public spending? Because it is the necessary precondition to reduce public deficits, because it's the precondition to any lowering of taxes. It's the condition to bring about the Responsibility Pact, which mustn't result in a transfer of labour costs from possessions to households who'd not be able to bear that because of the state of spending power today. So how to go about this? I believe it's possible to generate many savings whilst preserving our social model. Other countries have done this, and countries that had this social welfare tradition, I'm thinking notably of the Northern European countries, they emerged in better shape. We can be confident in this process because it has already been initiated. Let me remind you that public spending was brought under control in 2013 because the state will have spent less than what was agreed by Parliament. And on health insurance spending, there was less spent than was planned. Let me recall that in 2014 we will achieve 15 billion in savings. So what is left to be done? Between 2015 and 2017, we must generate an additional 50 billion more. It's a lot. In fact, that has never been achieved. If we bring this back to the reality, it amounts to 4%, only 4% of overall spending. But it needs to be achieved. To do this, I've decided on a new method. Rather than having indiscriminate budget cuts that affect everyone and that are therefore unfair, I propose to implement structural reforms to redefine the prime missions of the state and to see what our redistribution mechanisms are to make them fairer, more environmentally friendly and more effective. I will bring together a strategic council on spending that will meet on a monthly basis in order to assess policies. The timeline for the budgetary process, forgive the details, but that process will begin today. In April, the Prime Minister will send out statements to the respective ministers by setting the limits, not just indicating the savings to be achieved in 2015, but the savings to be generated through 2017. All spending, all policies, all structures will be concerned. The state, that is its role, will show the example, but it can't be alone in this process because it represents just over a third of public spending. The rest borne by local authorities and social welfare spending. So it's a local government organization that will have to be reviewed. In 2013, a law was passed to create 13 new metropolitan areas. That's a major breakthrough because they will boost the attractiveness of our local authorities, attracting more investment. These metropolitan areas of a sufficiently European size, sometimes global. That's the first step that was crossed. There's another step to be crossed in 2014 and to end by removing all forms of duplication that exists. So regions in a forthcoming decentralization bill will be entrusted with new responsibilities and will even be equipped with local regulatory adjustment powers in order to give even more freedom to elected representatives to work, with a strict clarification of competences between local authorities to be introduced. Local authorities will also be encouraged and indeed invited to merge. The regions, to begin with, their number can also change. There's no reason why that number should be the same in a few years' time to what it is today. And then the départements, those that are located in the large metropolitan areas, will have to redefine their future. That's what was done in the Rhône area with Lyon. I know that on these matters, local government representatives, as well as our citizens, are prepared for these changes, and to support them, there will be powerful incentives introduced, and the appropriations of the state will vary according to the combinations that are made. As to social security, which is at the heart of our Republican Pact and which it is my intention to preserve, because it is the common good of those who have no other good. We must fight against excesses and abuses. There are always some. We're all familiar with them. It's not just a matter of fraud that accounts for 600 million euros, half on the part of companies, half on the part of individuals who use rights that do not fall to them, to reduce medical duplication, medicines which in France make us record consumers, the use of generics that is not as developed as elsewhere, and this pressure on hospitals because there is no proper healthcare pathway. It is at that price that we will be able to guarantee the social model and our public service, and to continue on the spending front and make sure that the youth is our prime focus during this term of office. It's for young people that we have created 100,000 jobs for the future in 2013, and we'll add a further 50,000 this year. It's for young people that we've introduced the generation contract that will rapidly rise. It's for young people that we will increase the number of young people working in the community, an increase in 15% up to 35,000, that any young person wishing to work in the community can do so. It's in the favor of young people that we will increase university grants that have already benefited 100,000 students, and it's for young people that we are fighting against young people dropping out of school. Inequalities have increased on that front. Tomorrow at the Council of Ministers, the Education Minister will present a plan for priority education. The idea is simple: make more attractive for teachers positions in areas that are the most underprivileged, to promote measures to improve the working conditions and pay as well as career prospects for teachers. The school embodies the Republic, and the Republic is our legacy and our future. I will therefore be, and I stated this before the French people, I will be uncompromising in its defense. Anti-Semitism, racism, xenophobia will be prosecuted, as was the case at the initiative of the Interior Minister. The law will be applied everywhere without exception. Freedom of association, freedom of expression, freedom of creation can in no way be diminished by this, save exceptional circumstances. What is an exceptional circumstance? It's when the dignity of human beings is at stake, or major public disorder can be caused, and that is why we intervened. Dignity of human beings. I'm referring here to the debate on end of life, some particularly painful cases have made the news of late. The advisory committee on ethics will be submitting its report to me in the coming weeks. The health ministers will undertake the necessary consultations so that an agreement that is as broad as possible can be found on a bill. I also that this can be done without controversy and without division, knowing that a way is possible to bring together all sections of society to allow any individual suffering from an incurable disease causing unbearable psychological or physical suffering that cannot be relieved, to call for medical assistance under strict conditions to put an end to their life with dignity. The values of the Republic are the values of France internationally, and that is why it intervenes in the world and wishes to hold its rank and assume its full place. In Mali, a year ago almost to the day, I decided on a military intervention within the UN framework with Africans. The result is here the jihadists were repelled, vanquished. Mali has regained its territorial integrity. Presidential parliamentary elections have taken place. The state is being rebuilt. International aid can be made available. Out of the 3 billion euros in international aid pledged, 800 million have been used for the Malian. Yes, of course, there are times when we must acknowledge victories. That is a victory on terrorism, a victory for democracy, a victory for development. I wish to pay tribute to our servicemen who fought in extremely difficult circumstances, in very oppressive heat conditions. But the operation is nearing an end. It will involve only 1,600 soldiers at the end of February and 1,000 servicemen at the end of the spring. That is what I would call a useful intervention for France that was able to assume its own. In Central Africa, there again, France was called not by a dictator or a head of state in jeopardy, but called upon by the international community, by UN Security Council resolution, with the Africans to avoid a humanitarian disaster which unfortunately was sufficiently profound because there were so many brutalities that had taken place prompting our response. Not everything has been resolved, and I know of some who expect it all to be over within the space of a month, that we would be back, the armed groups fighting would have fraternized, and peace would be restored. No, that's not the case. Let me repeat here that the job is not yet over. We will continue the work, but necessarily in a different context. Firstly, because Europe will come the 20th of January. There will be operations that may be decided both from the security and humanitarian standpoints. Next, a peacekeeping force will at some point be decided and will be on the ground, and then political decisions have been taken. It's not our business to choose the leaders of Central Africa. France assists but doesn't act instead of. That period is over. So we are hopeful that gradually calm will return, the disarmament process will unfold, as well as political transition. Today there are 1,600 French servicemen at the side of 4,000 African troops, and there again, once the mission has been successul, these troops will return. The future of France is also the future of Europe, and I could put that differently by saying that the future of Europe is the future of France. In 2013, significant results have been achieved. The Eurozone, that was said to have been in jeopardy, as it was, has been stabilized. No country has exited the Eurozone, and those who were in the poorest shape are in a position to return to the markets to secure funding. Banking union may sound complicated, but it's simple. It's to avoid banking crises erupting and then asking the taxpayer to foot the bill. That's over. Banking union has been set up. It protects us from crises, and were there to be a bank failure in Europe, no one, save the banks, would have to come to their assistance. Yes, there's been progress, not enough. A growth pact that could have been broader, in my view. Jobs for young people viewed as a priority, but we could have deployed more resources on that. There's been progress on the secondment of workers that posed unacceptable competition problems in Brittany, but not only. So let's hail the victories that have been obtained. But 2014 isn't just a matter of plugging the gaps, preventing crises and preventing recession. It's all about reviving Europe. As I mentioned last time, these initiatives in favor of Europe must, and first and foremost, be between France and Germany. I'm making three proposals. An initiative for social and economic conversion between France and Germany. In that respect, the German decision as part of the broad coalition to introduce a minimum wage is a first step in the right direction. But we, and that's the purpose of the responsibility pact that I referred to, we must harmonize tax rules, notably for companies between France and Germany. Second initiative, we must coordinate our efforts for the energy transition. That's a major challenge for Europe, but we, France and Germany, must show the way in the development of renewables. Germany is ahead. They storage for energy grids. There we can show that we're at the cutting edge, and also in setting up joint industrial value chains for the energy transition. We're very proud of the Airbus achievements. Outstanding. Great company, Franco-German, but not only, European. So the idea is to build a large Franco-German company for energy transition, a great alliance. The last initiative may surprise some. I want there to be a Franco-German pair that can act in favor of European defence. Okay, there's the Franco-German brigade. The defence minister could say more about this, but we must go further. We must demonstrate a joint responsibility in favor of peace and security in the world. There will be a Franco-German Council of Ministers to be held in Paris on the 19th of February. We will lay down a principle, the Chancellor and I, that both our governments should coordinate with one another beforehand on all the major projects. This Franco-German momentum will allow us, if we're able, and I believe we will be, to revive the European idea. After elections to the European Parliament, we must move forward towards economic and monetary union with a Eurozone that can have a fully fledged government with targets focused on jobs, growth, and on the industrial standpoint, in particular, with necessary financial capability to allow us to act. That would be a government of the Eurozone. I would reassure those who are somewhat timorous on the eve of this European Parliament that will be renewed. Don't be afraid of Europe. You should rather fear that it might weaken and end up by disappearing. Forging Europe does not mean undoing France. It's by strengthening Europe, on the contrary, that we will protect France even more. And I won't let those during the coming months who wish to put an end to the European idea. There are not just in France, even those in the government. I will not allow those who wish to put an end to the European ideal or put an end to the European, the community acquis, everything that's been done over the generations, or those who wish to leave the euro, who believe thereby that they will save the nation, whereas they're in fact placing it in jeopardy because our future lies in Europe, but a Europe that we must redirect. That is what must mobilize us for 2014. France's destiny, what it will be in 10 years' time. That's the exercise I've asked that we should undertake, because we must look much further than the time frame I've set. Where will we be? What will we be in 10 years' time? A great country that assumes its place, that holds its own, that takes a decision, or a country that looks at others, that wrings its hands, that denigrates itself, that is worried, that represents a society that no longer has confidence in itself. Well, no. France must understand that it has a great destiny if it can prepare for it. And that is also the challenge of the responsibility part. There comes a time when we must bring together our strengths to mobilize, to focus on investment in all areas, productive, educational, environmental, scientific investment, everywhere. It's the idea of investment that must be paramount. Where will we be in 10 years' time? We must decide that today. The France of 10 years hence is being prepared today. I want it to be strong in its economy, otherwise there's no diplomacy possible, no international influence, harmonious in its society, otherwise it's dislocation, distortion, inequalities, clashes between communities. I wish it to be exacting in affirming its Republican destiny, because we must live together and fight against territorial inequalities. I want it to be full of demographic vitality. It remains the case, but with young people who assume their full place. I want France to be a country that remains attached to freedoms, to all forms of freedom, including press freedom. Those are the wishes that I extend to you, with a special thought for 4 who are not with us, who were held hostage, who are journalists, and not forgetting the 2 who are not held hostage in the Sahel. These 4 journalists taken hostage in Syria. Didier François, Edouard Ria, Nicolas Hénin, and Pierre Torres. Well, we will continue to do our utmost to secure their release. Thank you. I'm therefore prepared to answer your questions. And we will begin with you, and then we will have time for economic, social, internal questions, and then international questions.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. This year, again, it is my honor to say a few words to you on behalf of my colleagues who are here in great numbers today. First of all, I'd like to thank you for your wishes. I think we are all very sensitive to your expression of wishes. On behalf of the Association of the Presidential Press, I wish you a very happy and successful year 2014 for yourself and your loved ones. You mentioned just now the destiny of the hostages. We can only support what you said regarding the hostages. May I make a wish? If there is one image we wish to retain in 2014, is that of the head of state going to the airport of Villa Coublé to welcome back hostages who have been liberated, often accompanied by ministers Jean-Yves Le Drian and Laurent Fabius. This year, in 2014, we absolutely must obtain the liberation of our 4 colleagues. Their families and their friends wish to see them free again. We all wish to do this. We are all vigilant. We are all working on this, and we'd like to thank you for your efforts. Finally, I'd like to ask you the first question. Mr. President of the Republic, the publication last week of an article concerning you in a magazine called Closer. This article caused a lot of controversy, raised a lot of questions, a lot of curiosity, which is obviously inevitable. There's a need for clarification regarding, first of all, the French public and people abroad who are listening to us. In a few weeks' time, you will be on a state visit to the United States of America. Mr. President, the question I would like to ask you very directly is, Valérie Trierweiler, is she still today the First Lady of France? Thank you. I understand your question, and I'm sure that you will understand my answer. Each individual, each person, in his or her private life, goes through difficult periods, and this is the case at the moment. We are going through painful moments, but I abide by the same single principle. Private affairs, private business has to be handled privately. We must respect each individual's privacy. So this is not the right place nor the right time to do so. Having said that, if I didn't answer any questions today on this subject, I know that I will do so before you have another conference. Mr. President, Hervé Esquin of AFP, the responsibility pact you have just announced will undoubtedly be perceived as a shock by the employers' federation, but also by the trade unions who are wondering what about the social economy, the social market economy, which has been the success, or in such a success in Germany. You said you would not preside over a supply-side policy. Are you prepared to say today that you are a social democrat or a social liberal? You're trying to apply qualifications or formulas which correspond to reality. The reality is that we must do everything we can for employment, in favor of employment. And that is my priority, that is my commitment, employment. Today, to create jobs, we must not only find the right formulas for the jobs for the future generations, subsidized jobs for the long-term unemployed, for senior citizens. But if we want to sustainably reverse the rise in unemployment, we must make sure that companies create jobs. Who am I? I have said that I remain a socialist. I have been elected with the support of the Socialist Party, with the support of the left, and I became president because I remained faithful to my convictions. Am I a social democrat? Yes. This responsibility pact is a form of social compromise. Therefore, it is a social democratic pact. I haven't converted myself to liberalism. On the contrary, it is the state that takes the initiative and which makes sure that we strengthen our pact in favor of productivity. So I want our supply-side economy to be more competitive, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to give up my concerns for redistribution, for social justice. It's when we have a more competitive supply-side economy that we will create more jobs, we will create more income. I am deeply attached to social dialogue, and that is the purpose of the responsibility pact. So I'm told, why don't you stimulate demand? If it was sufficient to be called of the left to say that you have to increase deficits, that means those who governed France before me were extremists of the left. 600 billion more public debt, and having increased the deficit to 7%, that was a record. So the objective of the left isn't to increase deficits, nor is it to worsen the trade gap. I am responsible for the country's economy. At the end of my term of office, I will be judged on my performance in terms of employment. Will I have reduced unemployment? On the quality of education, on public accounts, will have restored the public accounts and industry. Will I have guaranteed the revival of our industry? I will be judged on the improvement in our competitiveness. I will be competitive on foreign markets, and I will also be judged regarding the reduction in inequality. So we have implemented policies in favor of employment with companies. How can you implement an economic policy without the support of companies? If companies don't create jobs, if they don't create wealth, what can you distribute? You cannot. You need economic growth in order to be able to redistribute wealth, and in order to reduce inequalities. And that is the purpose of what we're doing in housing, in taxation, and this will also be another major initiative, the reform of our tax regime, of our tax system. Mr. President of I am from BFM Television. Listening to you, it sounds as if you have announced a battle plan. You want to mobilize French society, major reforms to reduce public spending, to reduce deficit. But you have been in power since May 2012, and we have a feeling that you've been groping in the dark. And don't you have the feeling that you have lost 18 months? 18 months. What have we done over this period of time? We have immediately restored public accounts to health. Or rather, we have initiated the process of restoring our public accounts to health. That was the first decision made by Jean-Marc Ayrault in June 2012, to prepare a finance bill, which was painful because we did have to increase a number of taxes, and our compatriots are aware of this. Was it an easy decision? It wasn't an easy decision, but it was the prerequisite in order to allow us to fund ourselves on the markets at very low rates of interest and to fund ourselves on the best conditions. Did we waste our time by initiating negotiations on labor laws? We all have initiated historical negotiations which have resulted in a law securing employment. A year ago, in this very room, we implemented the Competitiveness Pact following the Gallois report. And then throughout the year 2013, we have continually reformed housing, consumption, but also vocational training. An agreement has just been signed by the social partners in vocational training. In 18 months, no other government has implemented so many structural reforms for so many years, And at the same time, because it was urgent, we have created the jobs for the future, launched contracts for the next generations. We have made sure there are 34 industrial plans that will be submitted, will be presented. 34. We had to put an end to the terrible difficulties which a number of companies were in, and we do have to handle a number of redundancy plans. And I would like to express my sympathy to employees who are working for companies which are going through painful redundancy plans. We have created the Public Investment Bank. Why have we accelerated these reforms? Because if I simply extended what existed before, it would not have been enough. So what happened? What did I observe at the end of 2013? There were signs of a recovery. Growth had increased by 1%, and it's true there is a trend of a stabilization of the unemployment rate. So if we don't accelerate these initiatives, we will not take the opportunities to benefit fully from a more vigorous growth. And I think 2014 will be a decisive year. The global economy, look at the global economy. The US economy is recovering. In Europe, the economies are recovering more than expected. And then there is France. Now, is France at the end of the train, the last wagon in the train? No. We have decided to play a driving force, to be a driving force. So we need to find a new framework. We need to establish a new framework. This may seem bold to put each individual each individual with his responsibility, to tell the employers you talk about creating 1 million jobs. Well, let's see if it's possible. You claim that it is possible to create 1 million jobs. Let's see. if it's possible. So we must tell all the trade unions of whatever creed, do you want to be the stakeholders in a major policy in favor of employment? Well, let's see what matching benefits we can find. And you can participate in all these discussions. And that's the reason why I wanted to accelerate initiatives. I could have said that there are elections in March, there will be another election in May and June. In 2015, there will be other elections. We could wait for the international economic recovery to materialize, but no, I wanted to take to anticipate these events and to take risks and to say now everybody must participate in this responsibility pact. Mr. President, good afternoon. I represent the Sud-Ouest newspaper. In your New Year's wishes and in your speech today, you gave us more details about the Responsibility Pact and cuts in public spending, which I know you don't like the word turning point, but it does seem to suggest a major change in your economic policy. Do you think you will be able to implement this economic policy, this new economic policy, with the same government until 2017. That is the time horizon you have set. And above all, do you have a political majority to sustain the implementation of this policy? Turning point. When you take a turning, you have to slow down, otherwise you risk skidding off the road. So it's not a question of simply turning, it's a question of accelerating along the same road. Secondly, public expenditure. We have already brought public expenditure under control. Now, if we don't want to raise taxes anymore, and I think that's what French people want, they don't want us to increase taxes anymore. If we want to enable businesses to modernize taxes on businesses, to allow households to see lower taxes and a stabilization of household taxes, and if we want to fund our measures in favor of employment through the Responsibility Pact, there is no other route than reducing public expenditure. This has never been done to such an extent. So we will do so with a completely new method, which will bring us to review all the missions and assignments whilst retaining the same objectives regarding our social welfare system. Can the government do so? It will do so. Because from today, it has been given the order to do so. It has been mandated to do that. It will take action to consolidate what has already been initiated. The Prime Minister has already announced that there will be a conference with businesses on revising the tax system. Do I have a political majority to sustain the implementation of the Responsibility Pact? I told you what will be the important milestones in the work that will be conducted in the next few months. To reduce labor costs, to simplify the social security system, to reform the tax system on taxes on companies, on households, and then the matching benefits for employment, job creation, the creation of quality jobs. We hope that the document that will be produced by the social conference, I will submit it. The government, rather, will commit itself to implementing this, will submit this plan to Parliament in order to get the approval of Parliament. The government will ask for a vote of confidence on this issue. And what about the others? What about the other French citizens? I think the majority, the political majority, will support our bid to ensure the future of France. It's a social, with this social democratic policy, and this will include, or the whole of the majority is in favor of measures in favor of the energy transition. So I'm sure the majority, my political majority, will support me. And I'm sure other political families, they will take their responsibilities as well. What are they doing? They can criticize the government, of course. They have every right to criticize. It's not a duty to criticize, but it's a right to criticize. They can wait and see, hoping that they will not have to take the unpopular measures that we will have to take. But I think that every person must be aware of what he or she can do for his country. So the moment of truth is close and will put everybody in front of his responsibilities. Mr. President, there's some competition between journalists here. You say that you have made a major commitment in your political term of office in favor of youth, and yet many young people want to leave France, are looking to go abroad, have a desire. Is this a sign that young people are disappointed by your policies? Madam, I live in France, and you too. When you are 25 years old, you want to be successful, you want to succeed in life. When you're 25, you want to be able to settle somewhere, to get a job, to work, and to be able to find fulfillment. When you're 25, it's unbearable to have to wait for a proper, sustainable job. When you're 25, if you don't have a permanent job contract, it is very difficult to accept. After having studied for a long time and you have to accept temporary jobs as a trainee, it's unbearable, of course. And when you're 25 and you are discriminated against because you come from certain neighborhoods or because of the color of your skin, there are risks which could lead to revolt, which could cause revolt. Now, there are young people who often are graduates, who have qualifications, thanks to the good quality of our university system or to our higher educational institutions, want to go abroad. I'm not going to criticize them for that. I often travel abroad myself, and I meet the young people who are abroad, the young French people who are abroad, and they tell me that they have decided to spend 2, 3 or 4 years in an emerging country or in a major industrialized country, or sometimes even in an African country where they contribute to the development of that country. But they haven't broken relations off with their motherland, with their homeland. On the contrary, they are the ambassadors of our country across the world. Then we hope, of course, that they will come back. How can we make sure they come back home? And it is an employment issue. It's also a question of the pay, of remuneration of the jobs and how we welcome them back. Many researchers, and I wish to pay tribute to them, many researchers accept to work in difficult conditions here in France in order to work, to do their research work, whereas they are often offered more attractive financial terms and conditions abroad. And when they go abroad, they then come back and they enrich France with their experience. And in terms of housing, housing is a very important issue, and remunerating talented people is also something very important, and is part of the tax issue. I have made sure that young creators of businesses, young business people who create startups, I have made sure that a law is passed that will enable them to sell their companies, their startups, at a better price. And I will be taking another initiative in the reform, that is to say, reform of employee profit participation. And it's important that employees of companies should also share in the profits of their companies, and to encourage the growth of companies through this way. Now, it's true that there is competition between geographical areas across the world. So I will be forming an attractiveness council, bringing together business leaders to make sure that more companies are attracted to France and more talented people come and settle in France from all over the world. We have also launched a worldwide competition for innovators, young, big, small, French or foreign innovators can benefit from our support for their projects. So when you're 25, we must do everything to give hope to our young people, and that is the government's commitment and the President's commitment.
Yes,
Vous avez expliqué tout à l'heure que vous ne souhaitez pas évoquer votre vie privée, et donc ma question ne portera
touch
pas
upon
là-dessus.
your private life, so I won't ask you about that. But you did say in a statement on Friday that you would look at the follow-up, including the legal follow-up after the publication of photographs in that magazine. My question is, have you taken a decision? If so, what is that decision more generally? Do you consider that privacy legislation protecting politicians should be strengthened, whereas it's stricter than in a number of countries? No, I'm asking for no change in the legislation whatsoever. I'm opposed to laws pertaining to a particular circumstance, and even worse, laws for personal situations. There are courts that are there to discipline, to censure invasions of privacy, and I'm president, but I do a question mark in my mind. I'm protected by immunity, as you know. That is to say that I cannot be sued. Can I sue others? So that really is a question of principle, but everything must lead me as a citizen to continue that process. And if I'm resisting, it's because I don't want there to be double standards. But I'm totally outraged. I repeat, totally outraged. It's not just a personal matter. Even if I have the responsibility that you know and that I assume fully, but it's a violation that affects a fundamental freedom and that can affect you all. We're a country of great freedom in France, and that is as it should be. But we have to have this principle of respect that we all have, unlike other countries, respect for privacy and the dignity of individuals.
Monsieur le Président, bonjour.
Mr. President, good afternoon.
This
morning, your friend François Rebsamen, chairman of the Socialist Group at the Senate, referred this morning to doing away with the status of the First Lady. Do you share that suggestion? There's no status regarding the spouse of the head of state. There never has been. There's a practice that varies according to the times and the individuals involved, notably the wives of heads of state who preceded me, and it's a custom. Now, what I view as essential is openness. That is, the resources devoted to the spouse must be known, published, and, I might add, as small as possible. Good afternoon, Mr. President. Your approval rating has been low for many months. So do you view that as a handicap for all the initiatives that you plan to launch? How do you view that? Do you recognize mistakes that may have led the French people to view you in that light? And notably, the fact that you pledged to reverse the jobless figures before the end of the year 2013, was that a mistake? Well, first of all, is the popularity an asset and impopularity a handicap? I mean, it depends what one does with both. I consider that what I must do is to allow my country to be stronger at the end of my term of office than it was when I arrived, and I set out the criteria: stronger industrially and economically, stronger in terms of Republican cohesion, stronger to express an international and European policy, stronger in its education system, stronger in its solidarity mechanisms, and of course stronger to create jobs. Have I made mistakes? No doubt. Were they those of having announced or promised that I would reverse the jobless trend? Had I not done so, many would have asked me, what's your objective? My sole objective is jobs. And if I look, I won't state this, what the situation was when I arrived and what it is today in terms of jobless figures. I am not crowing about this, but it was growing at the rate of 30,000 a month, 30,000 during the first quarter of 2013, then 15,000, and today the numbers have leveled off. Oh, might you say, well, stability is not a reversal in the trend. I could say, well, I'm waiting for next month, or more precisely the end of the month, but I'm not going to reason on a monthly basis. I'm not going to wait until there's the maximum effect of all the instruments we've put in place, because we will only be able to bring down unemployment if we create jobs in companies. Even if we're going to create more jobs for the future, more workfare jobs, if we do all we can to improve training and better skills building, we need to create jobs in companies, and French people have got the message clearly. So that's why when I announced the Responsibility Pact, if we look at the approval ratings, if they apply for my approval rating, then let's go for the Responsibility Pact. When I announced it, all parts of the political spectrum said we must go for it. We exchange less payroll taxes, less red tape for businesses and companies regarding accounting standards, better regulation, simplification, ourselves included, and then on the other hand, a pledge to hire more people to improve employment conditions. Agreed. Am I satisfied with that situation in public opinion? Well, it started almost immediately. There was no period of grace. Almost from day one. Why? Because when there's a crisis, when there's unemployment, when there's no growth, who do we blame? Unfortunately, we don't blame our neighbor, and that wouldn't be the right way. We blame the head of state, and I don't blame the French people. They say, he's been elected, so it's to do the job. So I'm making sure that we can achieve the result, which is a lasting fall in unemployment, and then I will see what my approval rating is at the end of my term of office, and I'll give you the answer at that point. Microphone, please. Mr. President, well, since I have the microphone, I'd like to put a question to you, Mr. President. France is involved in theatres of operation where it's fighting against terrorism, and this afternoon in Parliament, the president of the main opposition party of the UMP party raised your responsibility as president, head of the armed forces. We've all heard the journalists say is that private matters are settled in private, but can you guarantee to the French people that throughout this saga your safety was not or security was jeopardized? My safety and security are ensured at all times. Of course, when I'm on official travels in France or throughout the world with a very efficient unit, or for private purposes with a lower level of protection, but I'm permanently protected everywhere, and no one should have any worries on that score. And I thank the head of the opposition for his wise counsel. Furthermore, you mentioned French interventions abroad. I've had to strengthen a number of capabilities, and I've done so, and that's never prevented me, and the French people will testify, to move freely as I wish, but always with protection. Mr. President, you said earlier that you were a socialist. With this responsibility pact, is it socialism that's walking on the legs of Tony Blair rather than those of Lionel Jospin? On my own, I'm not giving you, trying to give a response here. It's not the same period, or as regards Tony Blair, not in the same country either. So I've done what I believe to be consistent with my ideas and useful for my country, and I'm not trying to replicate, including in Germany with Schröder, which is an experiment that's often mentioned, and there can be some analogy. I'd welcomed it, because there comes a time when a compromise is required, but where France and with trade unions not the same as in neighboring countries, an employers' confederation, both in its pronouncements and I hope in terms of its deeds, and as it announced after the Responsibility Pact, prepared to sign up. Trade unions who, of course, want to see what's going to be offered in return. So let's go for it. So what do you want to call me? Social, I am. Reformist, realistic, but above all, patriotic, if I were to use a word, because that's what it's about. It's not the future of a party. It's not an ideology that I'm professing. Even if I have ideas, I have commitments, but it's all about the future of France and the French people, because if we continue to live with 3.2 million unemployed, the 3.2 million who are totally without work, if I take those who are short-term unemployed, 4.5 million, and those are the ones that I'm turning to, or rather they're looking at me asking if I'm doing everything that I must do. Well, the answer there is yes. I'm taking a risk. Of course there is. If I were to remain inactive, it might be simpler. It would not perhaps necessarily improve my ratings, but there's always a risk. But I'm confident in the government majority in the country, in the trade associations. I'm confident in the trade unions. There comes a time, something happens in the life of a country when a crystallization can come about, and when there can be a process set in movement, and that will be critical. So I would like to ask you a question. There are words that reassure, and then there are words that worry. There's a curiosity that is sometimes expressed. People would like to know, a section of the French people would like to know, we know you're socialist and you're European, but why don't you say, I'm a social democrat? That's quite good, social democrat. Social democracy exists in Europe. You would not be alone, and you'd be very well understood, probably. I am always afraid of being misunderstood. At least those who have not understood that I was a social democrat can have an opportunity to ask a question. Good afternoon, Mr. President. You touched on this earlier. I'd like to ask you about the Dieudonné affair, what it reveals about the state of France. What do you view as the most dangerous in this regard? Dieudonné's, what's the most dangerous in your mind for French society? The fact that Dieudonné wishes to bring together an anti-Semitic France, black, white and bear, or his ties with the National Front. I'd like to begin by hailing a victory, because when one initiates an action, there has to be a result. Many were wondering, would it be possible to prevent the individual you cited from giving shows part of whose contact would be specifically anti-Semitic? Should we not allow him to go ahead because there were no legal means? The Minister of the Interior clearly stated
the French President François Hollande giving a press conference there at the Élysée Palace. This a few days after a French magazine published allegations of an affair with a French actress. Now, the president didn't address these allegations at the beginning of his speech, as some people thought he might. He went straight to the point. He was there to talk about his plans for the French economy. However, at the end of his speech, reporters started asking him questions. The first question he was asked was about his private life. He was asked about the status of the First Lady, Valérie Trégueveler, who remains in hospital. She's apparently being treated for stress. Now, he said this was a private affair to be dealt with in private. He did, however, admit to having painful moments in his relationship. He said he was clarified the status of his relationship before his planned trip to the US in February. Now, of course, he did also give plenty of policy details about his plan for the economy, his responsibility pact. You can find out more about that and what else has come out of that press conference at the top of the hour. François Picard will be here for you then. That's it, though, for me for now. Thanks very much for watching. Do stay tuned to France 24.